Hey guys, my name is Rob, and today I'm going to be unboxing and reviewing the GameSir Kaleid. This is an officially licensed Xbox wire controller, which is also compatible with PC, and is a follow-up to the GameSir T4 Kaleid. The Chinese company GameSir just kind of popped up a few years ago, and have since launched... Wait, hold up. We've been through this already. GameSir makes a whole bunch of controllers, but they can only think of like 3 names, so they're all called the same thing. The Kaleid and Kaleid Flux, as well as the G7 line of controllers, are all officially licensed Xbox wire controllers, all have very similar features, and all were originally priced between $44.99 and $49.99. As the Kaleid, not the T4 or Flux, is the most premium version of that line of GameSir controller, at least based on price, we're going to open it up, test it out, and see how it compares to the G7 HE and SE. Typically, I do a step-by-step unboxing in each review, but since we recently covered the G7 HE and I know this video is going to run a little long, I decided to save a bit of time here. The Kaleid comes with the same documentation that we have with the G7 HE, so the instruction manual on top, which is obnoxious and unfolds to 6 times that size, the GameSir info pamphlet in the center, a GameSir sticker on the left, and the QC card that looks kind of like a guitar pick on the right. It also includes a 10-foot braided USB-C cable, and then the only accessory included with the Kaleid that was not included with my prior GameSir controllers is this microfiber cloth, which I assume they provide because they're well aware that this controller is a fingerprint magnet. And then we have the actual controller, which looks pretty nice. As you can see, it's super reflective, so my apologies for any microphones or cameras or lighting setup you're getting reflected in the face of the controller. GameSir's description of the Kaleid is it's a transparent RGB controller, but unlike the original T4 Kaleid, this one's more like a transparent smoke. You can see the PCB inside the controller and the GameSir logo in the center, and all of that will show up much clearer when we have the controller hooked up and the RGB lighting on. Like all of GameSir's more recent controllers, the Kaleid does have Hall effect thumbsticks. It also has mechanical ABXY buttons and D-pad, though they're a little bit different. GameSir states they're micro switches, but also cushioned, so kind of similar to the V3 Razer that came out recently. We also have 2 rear buttons, positioned pretty much exactly like they are on the majority of GameSir's controllers. And then the rear grips have a bit of texture for grip, but unfortunately no rubberized grips on the Kaleid. Overall, I like the look and feel, particularly for a $50 controller. It feels very similar to the G7 controllers, and more so to the SE. The HE actually feels a little bit smaller than the Kaleid or the SE, and we'll look at that in just a moment. So here we've got the Kaleid on the top left, the G7 SE on the bottom left, and then the 2 controllers on the right are the same, the G7 HE. I just wanted to throw the Iron Man edition in here since I didn't have it when I did my review of the HE a few weeks ago. Obviously they all have a very similar form factor, but there are some differences between the models. The rear button placement is pretty much identical, but you can see the buttons are shaped a bit differently on each model to accommodate the shape of the shell. Again, they're all very similar, but the controllers do feel noticeably different in hand, and I attribute that to the form and shape of the rear grips. You can see that the grip curves just a bit sharper on the SE here, so the controller is slightly more narrow where your middle finger would rest. Then on the HE, it's much more drastic. I said during my G7 HE review that it felt noticeably smaller than the SE, and this is why. I'm 6'1" and have larger hands, and if I'm being honest, I would have to say that the Kaleid probably feels the best to me in terms of size, though I still prefer the overall feel of the HE due to the rubberized grips. The face buttons and D-pads are one of the biggest differentiating factors between these controllers. The G7 SE has membrane face buttons and D-pad. The Kaleid has these kind of hybrid action buttons that are mechanical micro switches, but have a rubber cushion as well, which GameSir basically says is for comfort. And then the HE has fully mechanical switches. I personally prefer the mechanical switches, and not just for the consistency and likely longevity, but I actually like the way they feel. There are a lot of gamers who don't feel this way though, and would prefer the feel of the cushioned membrane switches. This is why you see some companies like GameSir and Razer offering these hybrid micro switch action buttons that still have a rubber membrane as well, even though it's not necessary for the actuation of the switch. Before I forget about it, one feature that's only found on the G7 SE and not on the HE or the Kaleid are these lockout switches for the rear buttons, so you can actually disable these if you'd like. Both the G7 SE and HE also have magnetic removable faceplates, which the Kaleid does not, and that feature is way cooler on the Iron Man edition of the HE. It's got this Iron Man graphic underneath. The faceplates are interchangeable between the HE and SE, as well as the original G7, and the removable faceplates also make it really easy to swap out the thumbsticks, which again are interchangeable between all the G7 controllers. If you happen to own a GameSir G8 Galileo, which is a telescopic mobile controller, it comes with several additional thumbsticks, and they are also compatible with any of the G7 controllers. I actually like this one a lot. It's an extra short rise with a unique circular grip pattern, and this one is a bit longer than the default sticks on any of the GameSirs. The bumpers and triggers feel virtually identical on all the G7 controllers, but the bumpers feel and sound kind of hollow on the Kaleid, and the triggers have noticeably less aggressive stippling. One thing that all currently released GameSir controllers lack is physical trigger stops. There are several methods of making DIY trigger stops, such as this on my G7HE, and I did post a short on how to do these, basically using small Legos and glue. But the easier, and I'd say less messy way, is using small screws like this on my SE. And since several people have asked, we're going to go ahead and do a quick tutorial of how to do that and add these type of stops to the Kaleid. So first, just a quick disclaimer, I am not advising, encouraging, or recommending you attempt this modification yourself. This is a very simple mod, but that doesn't mean that something couldn't go wrong. And if breaking your controller would be a major burden for you, then it may not be worth it. I also assume that drilling 2 holes in the back housing of the controller will void your warranty, so again, just be sure it's worth it to you before you decide to do this. The Kaleid is a great candidate for this because the shell is semi-transparent, so we can actually see the range of the trigger inside of the back casing. Many controllers are very similar, with the bottom of the trigger ending just inside of the back shell, but not all, so you do need to know that before you do this mod. Generally, I will disassemble a controller to verify this before going forward, but it's just not necessary with the Kaleid. I don't use a specific size screw other than just very small. I have a ton of small screws around from various controllers and PCs that I've disassembled and parted out, so typically I'll just find 2 that match. These 2 are black and will match the Kaleid, and I have a driver handy that fits them, so that's what I'm going with. Sorry about the lighting and the shadows here, but I just need a little more direct light. I want to make sure I don't mess it up. I'm applying almost no pressure because I don't want to be pushing hard on the drill when the bit goes all the way through the back casing. And if you do decide to do this at home, that's what I would recommend. Just go slow, apply very little pressure. Just be careful. And there it is. I try to clean these holes out pretty well, so I'm not pushing any more plastic shavings down into the inside of the controller than I have to. I can start it by hand, but it's a little bit tight. I used a drill bit that was just a little bit smaller than the screws I'm using. Then I'm just going to tighten it up, and we should be good to go. So we have one down here. I'll go ahead and do the other one off camera. So we've got them both down here. They look good. They look even. They feel even. The distance on the trigger pull feels even. So we're going to jump over in the software now, and I'll show you why this works really well on GameSir controllers. This is the GameSir Nexus app, which is available on both PC and Xbox. If you're using it on PC, you can navigate the app with either the controller or a mouse. It works either way, which is great. And this is the only feature of the app available on PC that's not available on the Xbox. You can change the polling rate between 250, 500, and 1000 Hz. You do get this warning if you set it to 1000 Hz that it will disable the 3.5mm audio port, and that is true. Previously with the G7 controllers, you get this warning on either 500 or 1000 Hz, but now it only shows up on the 1000 Hz setting. That said, I've tested this today, and as of the time of this recording, the 3.5mm audio port on the G7 controllers is disabled on both 500 and 1000 Hz, but it does work in 500 Hz mode on the Kaleid. If we go into any of the profiles here, we can look at the customization options. I want to look at the trigger settings first since we just installed trigger stops. By default, you can see that the hair trigger mode is disabled and the minimum dead zone is set on 5%, basically. It's a 0 to 100 scale. I'm going to set these to 0, and you can see that the input is super low. Oh wow, it's really low on the right stick. I'm glad I didn't set these trigger stops any higher than I did. That's actually really strange because these trigger stops look and feel like they're set at exactly the same level. It's registering every time, so we're fine, but it's odd that the right stick is showing so much less input than the left. And just to be clear, it feels like the triggers have massive dead zones, even though I have them set to 0. None of my other GameSir controllers feel like this at all. The point of this, though, is to show you what happens when we enable the hair trigger mode, and as you can see, it registers a full pull. On controllers like a stock Xbox or PlayStation controller, you can't adjust this, and if you install custom trigger locks like we did on the Kaleid, it will create problems in a lot of games where the amount of pull on the trigger matters for gameplay. Moving on, we've got the lights tab, which is the one setting the Kaleid has that the G7 controllers don't, and as you can see, there's quite a bit in terms of customization options. The lighting changes on the left and right are happening because I'm pulling the triggers, and the controller does show this, which is cool I guess if you're into RGB lights. At the top you can change the type of animation, and then at the bottom you can adjust the speed and brightness. There's all kinds of presets, and you can enable audio mode where it reacts to the game audio or music I assume, and you can also turn it off completely by turning the brightness all the way down, which is probably what I'll be doing most of the time. We have the vibration tab where you can adjust the vibration levels individually for each of the 4 rumble motors. You can also sync the trigger motors with the grip motors. You can test your settings or levels and see how you like it. And then you can also just turn it all off, which just like the lights is probably what I'll do. Possibly the most important tab is the thumbstick page where you can set the inner and outer dead zones or range of each joystick. And they include a tester on this page so you can see in real time how the settings affect the thumbsticks. By default, they have built in an inner dead zone, and I always start by setting that to 0 and seeing what the readings are. You can also enable raw mode for each joystick, which their description says removes the outer radial dead zone, but this actually changes the circularity algorithm from circular to rectangular. As I said, I'm going to set both inner dead zones to 0 and then just go from there. Unfortunately, as you can see, I'm not getting a resting value of 0 on either stick when I have it set to 0. For each stick, I'm just going to up that inner dead zone setting by 1 until I have perfect zeros. And 1 is not going to cut it on the right stick, so we're going to go up to 2. And that looks better, so 2 it is. Now we'll do the left stick. And it is almost there, not quite perfect at 0, so I guess we're going to go up to 1. That might not even result in any noticeable drift in game, but we're going to go 1 on the left and 2 on the right for now. Then the remaining tab is mapping, and here you can actually map any of the buttons. We're just going to set the rear buttons, and all you do is click on the button title on the left or right of the controller image, and it opens a menu where you can choose what you want to map to that button. So really quickly here, I just want to show you guys what I was talking about as far as the trigger dead zones on the Kaleid. I backed out the screws I added as trigger stops and recalibrated the sticks and triggers, which had 0 effect. You can see here that there's a ton of play or dead zone with these triggers. This is with the initial point set at 0, so these should be pretty much instantaneous. This is the G7 SE, and you can see the travel distance for activation is much less. And then this is the HE, and they're the same. They're actually sensitive enough that I don't typically have the initial point set to 0 on the HE or the SE, because if you sneeze on the controller, the triggers activate. I'm not sure why the triggers are like this on the Kaleid, and again, I've recalibrated several times to see if that would have any effect, but it does not. So I do think the trigger stops are no. This is a noticeable downside to the Kaleid compared to any of the G7 controllers. Jumping over to Gamepad LA, we're going to test the polling rate. Interestingly, the Kaleid actually shows up as a GameSir controller, which none of the other GameSir controllers I've tested do, and we are in 1000 Hz mode. And we are showing 1000 Hz max polling rate, although the average was only 918. We're going to go ahead and run it again, and we'll do 3000 inputs this time and see if that average comes up at all. And not much better at 928 Hz. Still, the average latency was also consistent at just a tiny bit over 1 millisecond. This is the G7 SE, which I also wanted to run a test on, and specifically I'm testing on a different PC today, one that I haven't used the HE or SE on before and have never installed the 1000 Hz script from GameSir, because I wanted to see if that script was still necessary. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry, we're going to go over it, because the SE in 1000 Hz mode is still showing up as a 500 Hz controller. We'll test the HE as well, though Smart Money says it's going to be the same. And it is the same. In 1000 Hz mode, it's testing as a 500 Hz controller. If you find you have the same results with the SE or HE, there is a workaround. On GameSir's website, they have a tutorial for how to enable 1000 Hz report rate, and it does specifically say here that the 1000 Hz mode only works on Windows 11, and I had a few comments on my prior G7 HE review that seem to confirm this. I can't specifically test that at the moment because all of my PCs are now on Windows 11, but I will make a point of testing it in the future. If you are on Windows 11 and your software and controller are both up to date and you're still not getting 1000 Hz on a G7 controller, you need to scroll down to the bottom of this tutorial and download the script package. The question mark icon they reference in the tutorial doesn't show up for me in the Nexus software, so I'm just going to download it from here. I did have to disable antivirus in order to get this download to work, but we're just going to roll with it. You'll open this folder and then you're looking for the enable file. Oh yeah, we need to extract it first. Okay, now we can open this folder and find the enable file. You will want to right click and hit run as administrator, and then my PC is going to warn me again that it's not sure that it likes this thing, but I don't take orders from inanimate objects, so I'm going to go ahead and run it anyway. Then you'll get this message stating the operation completed successfully and letting you know you'll need to restart the PC, so that's what we're going to do. So now we'll go ahead and verify that the G7HE is still in 1000 Hz mode and test it again. And now we're showing 1000 Hz, though like the Kaleid, it's averaging just over 900 really. Same with the SE, we're going to verify it's still in 1000 Hz mode and run Gamepad LA one more time. And pretty much the exact same results as the HE, so with the use of the script, 1000 Hz mode does work on the G7 controllers. However, as far as I know, this currently only works on Windows 11, not on Windows 10. The Kaleid, on the other hand, works on 1000 Hz out of the box with no script required. Over here on Gamepad Tester, we've got the Kaleid, and you can see it has a consistent resting value, but keep in mind we set our dead zones in the Nexus app, so it should. We'll go ahead and run a circularity test, and I should point out that I left both thumbsticks set to raw data mode, and as you can see by the results, it looks very similar to standard controllers with rectangular circularity algorithm, and this 11% error rate is pretty standard. A lot of people expect Hall effect thumbsticks to have zero error on these circularity tests, but the issue is that the term average error is a bit misleading. This test is measuring the difference in the outermost range of movement for the entire 360-degree rotation of the thumbstick. So if you have a rectangular algorithm, it's going to show up as error, but there's nothing wrong with these thumbsticks. They're actually about average, if not a little bit better. If we turn off raw data mode, we're essentially changing the circularity algorithm and enabling those outer dead zones again, and you'll see the super low error rate that you expect with Hall effect thumbsticks. And you get the same results with both the G7HE and SE, a standard average error with the raw data on and extremely low average error with it disabled. It's also obvious that the Kaleid and these G7 controllers have the same thumbstick modules, as the circularity test results are pretty much identical for all three. I think that wraps it up for testing, but if I missed or left anything out that you wanted to see, let me know in the comments and I'll try to add those in future reviews. The Kaleid is definitely in the same league as the G7 SE and HE controllers, so of course the question is which one is better and which one should you buy? Just for clarification, the Kaleid sells for $49 and change, as does the plain vanilla G7HE, the G7 SE is $45 and the Iron Man SE is $60. Not pictured, you also have the original G7 at $42 and the Kaleid Flux at $47. The original G7 does have micro switch face buttons, but does not have Hall effect thumbsticks, so for me I would probably rule that one out. The Flux is the Kaleid, but without the mechanical buttons, which some people might prefer, but definitely not me. The Iron Man edition is only cosmetically different than the standard HE, which by the way does come in black and white. So really to me, the question is just G7HE versus Kaleid, and honestly, I'm afraid it's mostly going to come down to personal preference. The Kaleid does feel a little larger, which might be a determining factor for some people, and although it has mechanical face buttons, they are designed differently and targeted at gamers who prefer the feel of membrane buttons. Obviously, it also has the RGB element, which does matter to some gamers. If you use wired headsets for gaming, the Kaleid might be a better option for you, as the 3.5mm audio jack does work in 500Hz mode, whereas it doesn't on the G7s. All of that said, I personally still prefer the G7HE. I think it feels a bit more premium, partially due to the rubberized grips, but also the plastics used just feel like higher quality. It also feels more responsive in-game to me than the Kaleid, both on PC and Xbox. I don't have any evidence to support that it should, especially considering the G7 requires GameSir's 1000 Hz script and the Kaleid doesn't, so if anything, the logical assumption would be that the Kaleid is more likely to report at 1000 Hz on Xbox, but whether set to 250, 500, or 1000 Hz, after using both controllers off and on for the past 2 weeks, the HE just feels superior to me. So if I had to recommend one to buy, it would be the G7HE, but honestly, I might consider waiting just a bit for more info on the new GameSir releases. Since I reviewed the G7HE a few weeks ago, GameSir has launched a controller, started pre-orders for a second, and unveiled a third. The T7 launched just a few days ago, and this one I'm not particularly interested in. It's essentially a budget version of the G7 controllers with no rear buttons or app customization, but it is very competitively priced at $34.99. As I was wrapping up this video, GameSir announced the launch of the T3 Pro or Tarantula Pro, which is a wireless PC and Switch controller with a PlayStation-style symmetrical thumbstick layout, TMR thumbsticks, a feature to swap the face button configuration, 9 additional programmable buttons, and finally a GameSir offering with physical trigger stops. I'm pretty excited about this one. I'll be reviewing it as soon as I can get my hands on it. It's currently available for pre-order and is expected to begin shipping on September 30th. In August, GameSir also posted pictures from Gamescom in Germany, which included images of the G7 Pro. Though we don't know a whole lot about it yet, this appears to be a licensed Xbox wireless controller. I'm very intrigued by this one and really looking forward to trying it out. So GameSir has some really interesting stuff coming down the pipeline, but in the meantime I'm not sure what to do with my abundance of GameSir controllers. So, to celebrate the 100 subscriber milestone for this channel, which we hit this week, I'm happy to announce a giveaway for my white G7HE. First off, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who has watched, subscribed, liked videos, answered and asked questions in the comments, and generally just supported the channel thus far. I really appreciate it, and assuming everything works well, I plan for this to be the first of many giveaways on the channel. So if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future giveaways. I wish I could do something simple like pick a winner from the comments or from channel subscribers, etc., but per YouTube TOS, requiring likes, subs, or comments to participate in a giveaway is strictly prohibited. I know people still do it, but we're going to follow the rules here, so in the description you'll find a link to a Google form which you'll need to complete in order to enter the giveaway. You'll also find the full contest rules in the description, but I'll try to post those on the screen for you here as well. The giveaway opens when this video goes live at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on September 15th and will run through 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, September 29th. I'll post the winner on the community tab of this channel on September 30th, but we'll also plan to include the winner selection in whatever video I post within 7 days of the giveaway closing. This giveaway is not sponsored by or affiliated with YouTube in any way, and also is not sponsored by GameSir. Just a quick note, I am giving away this specific G7HE, which is modified with custom trigger stops, and one of the questions on the entry form asks if you'd like to keep the trigger stops. If you're the winner and you answer no to that question, I will remove them, but please be aware that there will likely be some scratching and or glue residue from the removal process. Thank you again for all the support on the channel. I hope this video helped you out, and if so, please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If there are any specific controllers you're hoping to see me review in the future, please let me know down in the comments. I'll be doing more reviews regularly, so I hope to see you back here again soon. Thanks for watching.